So today we are going to make a Bible cover. It's basically a book cover that's 2 layers of fabric plus pockets, so the sides of your book slide into those pockets. Here I've got my Easter egg fabric and my lint lilies in purple. So how that works, you just open your book, in this case the Bible, and slide it into one of those pockets to hold it steady, and then when you do the other one, it's nice and tight and easy to carry. But every Bible, every book is a slightly different size. So this is first thing you have to do is measure your Bible. First off, go ahead and make peace with, you're not going to have even numbers mostly, because when you measure, it's usually not exact. Now mine, once it's open, and you have to measure open because of the spine, is 8 3/4 by 12. So you're going to add 2 inches to each of those measurements. And you're going to need an outer fabric. This is the Heavy Cotton Twill from my fabric designs. And I have a basic cotton in a slightly smaller scale, which is a great thing about my fabric designs. You can change the scale of every order when you're shopping, so you can make things match exactly like you want, like if you're making a mommy and me dress. Now normally I would use this smaller inside print also for the pockets, but so you can see it easier, I'm going to use some more of the twill. Pockets are folded, so they're going to be twice as wide as you think you need. In this case, mine are 7.5 wide by the 10 3/4 height of my piece for the Bible. And then you're going to need some 3-inch wide strip by 12-inch long, and these are going to make your handles. You're going to need 2 of those. You're going to fold them in about 1/4 inch on each side, and then fold them in half and stitch down both sides. So let's go ahead and do that stitching now, and we'll be right back by the magic of editing. Okay, so now I have stitched down both sides of my handles and they are ready to install. So a lot of this project is just getting things ready to sew. So grab your pins or your fabric clips. I use clips because I stab myself with pins every time. So now we're going to assemble this. Start with your outer lining facing up, because we're going to stitch this and then turn it. So everything's kind of upside down and sideways. Take your handles and you're going to attach them facing inward, again because we're turning. Just center them on your piece. Now how you center it, you can count your squares, do division, math, or you can fold your piece in half and then assign it that way. You can use a ruler and draw using tailor's chalk. For this, I'm just going to count squares and eyeball it. Of course, if I was making this to sell or a customer commission, I would take the time to use ruler and draw it out and chalk it and make sure everything was exactly lined up. But I've been doing this long enough for this small of a project. I'm eyeballing it. You can get it pretty close, especially for something like this where it's not super bulky. Now, when you lay down your straps, make sure that you don't twist them. The same side of the fabric needs to be facing up, otherwise it's not going to lay right when you do. So take the time to make sure both sides are up, and then kind of flatten your back loop and clip those in place so you don't bump them while you're assembling the rest of the Bible cover. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side, and like I said, I'm just pulling this over to the side so I can see my squares easier. And since this is a nice linear fabric, it's easy for me to eyeball across and make sure where I'm at. Again, kind of pay attention to the direction of your print and make sure that you've got the right side of the fabric facing up. On this loop, it doesn't matter if the loop's on top or the loop's on bottom. What matters is the same sides of the fabric are facing up. With the loop, you're just squashing that to make it easier to get everything lined up and sew neatly without too many bumps and lumps when you get ready to start sewing. Now your first instinct is going to be put that lining fabric on, but we're not ready for that yet. Next part that you have to line up is going to be your pockets, and you're going to put the raw edges to the outside because that fold edge is keeping you from having to sew a second seam. That's the nice finished part. And line both of those up with the raw edges. And since this is a directional fabric, I'm making sure they're both facing and matching the same way as the other directions. Now we can add the inside lining piece. Now it's going to take a little time to make sure it's all lined up because you do have some lumps and bumps under there with all the other fabrics, and you want to make sure all the fabrics are nice and lined up. So then you need to clip or pin all the way around, and except leave an opening at the bottom, and then we're going to stitch all the way around at the machine. So now I've clipped all the way around and we're ready to start getting the sewing done. You're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance on this, and I'm going to start at the bottom on the other side of where I'm going to leave the opening for turning. Now on my machine there is a mark on the bed of the machine that I can use to know where I'm at a 1/2 inch. Where this is on your machine is going to vary. And you're going to stitch all the way around with that 1/2 inch seam allowance. You can use a stitch guide if you don't have clear markings on your machine. They'll make it easier to keep your seam allowance even, which is pretty necessary in this type of project. I'm using the Clover Stick and Stitch. It's not magnetic. It has a removable glue on the bottom of it that can be refreshed as the stickum power is lost. And likewise with the stitch guide, you have to learn where to stop before you turn it, where you're going to have the same seam allowance. Now here I'm getting close to the handle, so I have to go ahead and remove the clips so the stitch guide doesn't hit them, and just make sure I've got them nice and secure in there so they don't slip. And you might want to slow down when you're sewing over these additional layers. It'll just make it easier on your machine, and every machine is a little different on how it handles layers like this. So just take your time, and on this machine you'll see me stop and move my hand out of frame. This is a non-computerized machine, so it doesn't have all those lovely put the needle down when you stop features, so I have to use the hand wheel on some of that. And make sure that the pockets are not getting bunched up under there before you sew. You want to make sure none of them are getting folded over. The one that you really have to watch is like the one I'm coming to now, because it's facing in a direction that it could get pushed. So just use your fingers and feel for that, and make sure everything feels nice and smooth as you sew. You will get the hang of learning to feel when there's a bunch that shouldn't be there on the fabric. And now we're getting close to the end where the opening is, and so I'm going to have to stop. But you know what? That didn't sound right. Hey, look at that. I just lost bobbin roulette. I have been sewing with nothing for the last most of a side of the Bible cover. So it'll take a minute, and I will have to rethread and create a new bobbin. We will be right back. Again, power of editing. Okay, I've got a new bobbin in, and now I've just got to go back to where I was when I ran out of bobbin the first time and realign things and make sure that I'm going to be stitching over the same spot, get my stitch guide back in place, and I will need to back stitch some here to re-secure everything, and being careful going over those handles again, getting to the end, and we're going to turn. And now we're going to come up, and we've got to remember to leave an opening for turning. Now, pure user error, I apologize. I did something wrong with the camera and lost my video that was showing you how to turn. basically you're going to cut the corners off to reduce bulk, and then you're going to put your hand in through that opening and pull it back through and push out all the corners, so that we can do the final top stitching. Again, sorry about losing that clip. Okay, so this is the Bible cover after it's been turned, and I did go ahead and press it with the iron just really quickly to get all my edges nice and even. So now we're going to top stitch it. For the top stitch, you're going to need to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but not a full 1/4 inch, what they call a scant 1/4 inch. Basically that means you're going to err to the inside of it where it's not quite a 1/4 inch. Again, on my machine, I know the edges of that and where it comes to. Get your ruler out. The stick and stitch guide does have a template in it, so you can tell exactly how far out it is from your needle. That will get you, help you a lot as you start to learn your machine. Be sure to back stitch, and I'm starting at the bottom so that I'm going over the opening to start with. Now right there is a edge on my machine. It's not smooth, so I have to make sure that pocket is not getting folded under. You really don't want to miss that on the end after you've done all this work. Now these corners are going to be a little snug. Depending on your machine, you may need to move the wheel by hand, not necessarily for the bulk, but just to make sure that you're not over sewing, that you're stopping where you need to stop. And as you start, it may need a little bit of help getting started depending on your presser foot. So the basics of it are slow down, take your time, make sure you're being even. I'm not using the stitch guide on here because of the handles would knock the stitch guide out of the way. But you can still use that stitch guide in the template included to make sure that you've got things lined up where you need it. And if you don't have markings already on your machine, again, be careful of that pocket. You can use painter's tape after you make your measurement to give you a nice long line. Now I do want to talk a little bit about, again, on these corners. When you turn these corners, the bulk of that corner can get caught up in your presser foot, depending on the opening and the setup of your machine. Every machine is different. Everyone has different tolerances. But what you need to look at is when you turn that corner, is their bulk stuck or sticking up in that opening of the presser foot, or is that edge actually being seen in that opening there? If it is, you're going to have to give it a little bit extra help getting started. Sometimes you can do that with pressing with your fingers. Sometimes you may have to use the edge of your seam ripper. Just be super careful to never get it under that needle. You may have to give it a little extra help on pushing it to get it started, and then it will go. Otherwise it can just keep stitching in the same spot and start getting eaten by the machine basically. And that's it. We've clipped our threads and our Bible cover is ready. These make great gifts and they're really easy to use like we showed before. So here's how it looks on the inside, and you can see using that slightly different scale you can see the pockets easier. You just slide in the book, and if you've got a hardcover, you may need to make a shorter pocket so it has more room, but that's it. You have a Bible cover and you're ready to go. Enjoy.